Good evening. My name is Joseph B. Harris. I'm a counselor and author. I was a counselor in New York, drug addiction counselor for 45 years in New York. I also have a bachelor's degree in counseling, and I'm credentialed by the state of New York, which has been reciprocity to Florida. And my main focus is how to overcome drug addiction. We know that drug addiction is a very serious, deadly, dangerous, life threatening problem killing thousands of Americans and people around the world every day. So we want to take this problem very seriously. Now, I mentioned I'm an author of 3 books. My first book, Escape from Critical Confusion, autobiographical textbook, talks about how growing up in New York City, poor child, how a child gets into juvenile delinquency and repeats criminal behavior even after getting caught, how someone gets into drug addiction, the whole life of drug addiction from a reality perspective, and then how to come out of it. Because I was on heroin, intravenous heroin, for 12 and a half years while living in New York City. Alcohol every day with the heroin, marijuana, pills. My second book is Black America Breaking the Code. And I talk about us, Black Americans, our contributions to the country, our rights to be citizens. I have a chapter on women, a chapter on men. I talk a lot about history and ways that we can do things to change a lot of the conditions that are unhealthy for us. So that's my second book. And my third book, Drug Addiction, the Most Powerful Enemy Against It, A Recovering Sober Mind. And we're going to discuss drug addiction tonight or this evening. And as we know or may not know, drug addiction makes you sick. All of these drugs, alcohol, heroin, marijuana, methamphetamine, benzodiazepines when abused, all of these drugs make you sick. Cigarettes kill 434,000 people a year. All kinds of illnesses come from smoking cigarettes. So we don't want to take cigarettes lightly, like some people say, well, cigarettes are legal. Alcohol is legal. Well, it's about money. It's not about protecting you. It's about people making money. We need to know that. Just like you have legal drug dealers and you have illegal drug dealers. So the legal drug dealers are the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry. So once you abuse these drugs, now if a person is drinking socially, because there's stages of progression. I gave a lecture on that. If you a social drinker, you can drink and never have a problem. I had an aunt like that, my aunt Bertie. She would drink every now and then. Come to the party. Everybody else is drinking and eating and having fun. Hey, Bert, you want to drink? She's okay. I have one. Maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. 7 o'clock. No, I have one. 10 o'clock. I have one. She goes home. Never finished the drink. May not drink again for 3 months or 4 months. She never had a problem. So people can use alcohol, the liquid drug, and other drugs too, if they can do it recreationally. But the problem is, if you try one of these drugs and you like it, it makes you feel good, you're just having such a good time and you want more. That's the problem. That's why I tell young people all the time, young people, do not try any of these drugs. They're deadly. And how they trick you is if you try it and nothing really happens. First time I try it, I'm high, I have a good time. Like, hey, what is all this stuff about going to jail and losing jobs and dropping out of school? Nothing happens usually on the first time. Some people, I've known people to use intravenous heroin for the first time and die. Several people, so we don't want to try these drugs. But once we do, and we become full-blown addicted, they're going to make you sick. Now I'm going to read off the dictionary's definition of sick, what sickness means. To be troubled or grieved, unwell, suffering from disease or illness, deeply disturbed or distressed, failure, in poor condition, impaired, mentally ill or emotionally disturbed, morbid, abnormally unwholesome, prolonged, or even chronic poor health. When we think about heroin, intravenous heroin, you can get what's called bacterial endocarditis, which is an infection on the heart. People die from it all the time on heroin. From a microscopic amount of fungus that could fit through the canal of a needle, goes up into the brain, causes a massive hemorrhage, and you have to have brain surgery. You know, I mean, heroin kidney disease kills 25% of heroin addicted people. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. Alcohol, damage to the heart, damage to the liver, damage to the stomach, damage to the brain, damage to the, I mean, just so much damage related to these drugs. So we think about, oh, how much I love to get high. We need to know the reality of that condition. And, with getting high, it also can take you to that point where you don't want to do anything else and nothing else matters. All your values, all your morals are gone. Things that you were taught from a child that you would never do, you're doing it when you're on drugs. You use enough of these drugs, they will make you do things that you would never do. So we know that. As drug addicted people, we know that. And as we know, and I mentioned to you guys many times, there's a difference between the drugged brain and the sober brain. Once a person becomes full-blown addicted and the brain has been influenced to such an extent that behavior is repeated over and over again in the thinking, it becomes conditioned. When it gets to that point, a lot of times we believe that we can't come out of it. There's no hope. That's what a lot of drug addicted people believe. And that's why they don't try. And everybody in that circle of drug addiction is preaching the same foolishness. Oh, once an addict, always an addict. You could never stop. Oh, no, you can never stop using. Only 3 to 4% of addicted people come for help. That's the study that I saw when I just left Good Samaritan Hospital last October 2018 after 30 years of working there, and detox and rehab. And one of the studies showed that only 3 to 4% of drug addicted people come for help. The other 96 to 97% stay out there and die. So one of the reasons for that is because people believe that they can't change. And we need to change that focus, because when your brain is drugged, it's a total different way of looking at things when that brain is not drugged. Let's look at the dictionary's version of drugged. Dull, mentally slow, stupid, blunted in feeling or perception, blind, lacking in sensitivity, listless, sluggish, slow moving, not active or busy, not keen, not vivid, gloomy, cloudy. This is your brain. So I've had patients to tell me that they use $200 worth of heroin a day, $6,000 a month of drugs in your brain with the heroin, the mixture, the other stuff that the drug dealer uses to put in there to make his profit more profitable. All of these drugs are in your brain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It cannot be functioning properly. So when I remove the drug from my brain, that's when the mind starts to open up. I'm regaining consciousness, because when you're on drugs, you're in a semi-conscious state. So once that mind starts to open up and clears up, I can begin to think about some of my morals and values. I can begin to think about the reality of my condition. I can begin to think about some of the things that I want to do, like in detox, when a person goes into detox. Oh, he's all messed up. He goes in smelling bad, miserable. We give him medication. He's feeling a little bit better. And while he's laying in his bed, he's thinking, oh, man, should I sign out? Should I stay in? Should I get high again? And then as he starts to feel a little bit better and sits in some groups, and some of the people that have been in rehab, went from detox to rehab, that have been in treatment for 10 or 12 days, they're talking about some of the good things about recovery when you get through that first process, but the first part of that process. Because remember, recovery is a process. Process means step by step. It also means many changes. So when I first go into the hospital, I'm going through all kinds of many changes, emotional changes, physical changes. But if I'm willing to do the work, and that's where responsibility comes in. It's your life. Part of responsibility means I'm willing to do the work no matter how hard it is. And I'm happy to have this opportunity to take my life back from drugs. That should be the thought. So no matter what recovery throws at me, I'm ready. Withdrawal, what else you got? Anger, frustration, guilt, come on. I got my counselor, I got my social worker, I got my psychiatrist, I got A&N, I got a sponsor, I got family members that love me. Let's get ready to rumble. Because the thing is, in recovery, you're going to have to challenge your addiction. Part of challenge means demand for identification. It also means calling into a duel. So when my addiction attacks me with craving, I'm going to challenge that craving. I'm going to demand identification. What is this feeling about? Because craving is a feeling. Part of feeling is thought and perception. So when I get that feeling, I'm going to start thinking about using. So I'm going to know in the broadest sense the reality of this feeling and thought. Poison, deadly, enemy, danger. Nothing about happiness is in that thought. Anybody who's ever had a drug addiction problem knows that relapse is not fun. And when you relapse, what do you say? Oh man, what did I can't believe I did this again, man. I went to the hospital, I got sober. No, I can't believe I did this. You're always going to be sorry. When we think about craving, craving is a feeling. It can't hurt you. So when I'm craving, and that's part of the conditioning of the mind, when I'm craving, I need to understand this is a symptom of addiction. If I'm addicted to heroin, I'm supposed to crave heroin. There's absolutely nothing wrong. If I'm addicted to alcohol, benzos, methadone, I'm supposed to crave. But because I've come to the point where I understand that these drugs are destroying my life, I am not going to react to its commands. I'm going to develop that perception after practicing over and over again to refuse to cooperate with my addiction that using is not an option. No matter how bad I feel, no matter how good I feel, I know a drug can't help me. If I'm depressed, if I feel guilty, drug can't help me because the drugs caused that situation in my mind. So we want to look at craving as something that's normal when I'm trying to take my life back from drugs, and it's something that I'm willing to deal with. And how I'm going to deal with it is I'm going to refuse to cooperate. Every time it attacks me in my mind, and that's where the seed of addiction is, in the mind, as I mentioned once before, they say drug addiction is a biopsychosocial disease. Bio is the body biology. Social is that underclass, that subculture where nobody wants to be in. And then the psych part, that's the mind. That is where the seed of addiction is, in the mind. Nowadays, we call it a brain disease. So we need to know that. If I'm thinking properly, I can beat this fellow, because remember, humans are creatures of habit. So we can adjust to any kind of situation. It's totally against your nature as a human being to be addicted to drugs, because it's self-destructive and it's a form of slavery. So when I come out of addiction, when I go into the hospital detox, I go into rehab, I'm working my outpatient program, my A&A, and I'm coming out, I'm in my natural human being state. So once I get into the habit of thinking like a sober person again, I can beat this fellow. And I can adjust to my total sobriety lifestyle. I was sober before I got high, so there's absolutely no reason why I can't adjust to being sober and have just as much fun as I had before and as everybody else that never used drugs. Number one, we're human beings first before anything. We talk about you're a drug addict. You're a human being first, more than anything else. I'm a human being before I get on drugs. I'm a human being while I'm on drugs. And I'm a human being when I come off drugs. So you need to remember that. Drug addiction is an experience. That's not who you are. We're human beings. The most powerful living things on this planet is human beings. Not heroin, not crack, not alcohol, not methamphetamine, not cigarettes. We are most powerful. We're the ones with the brain. But when that brain is drugged, you can't function on a human being level. It's not going to happen. So I want to talk about how drugs make us insane. I'm going to read the dictionary's version of insanity to you. And I want you to tell me if it sounds like a drug-addicted person. Not sound mentally ill, upset arrangement, disorder in the brain, unsettled, very foolish, not workable or useful, not handling sensible matters well, straying beyond reasonable bounds, going beyond reasonable limits, senseless, stupid, foolish, having no real point or purpose, meaningless. That's where your brain is when you are drugged up every day, whether it's alcohol, heroin, methamphetamine, whatever. You are supposed to behave insane because that's how your brain is functioning. Everything comes from the mind. My hands can't go like this unless my brain tells it to. If my brain is drugged with, $200 worth of heroin and marijuana and alcohol, I'm going to be thinking like an insane person. So we want to nip that in the bud. And the best way, the first thing you have to do if you're full-blown addicted is go into detox. That is extremely important that you go into detox. Now, we know that these drugs make us sick. We know that they destroy human beings because you're involved in self-destructive behavior. The last stats I had before I semi-retired last year was 72,000 people died, man, in 2017. 72,000, I'm sure it was high last year and probably about that much now. 72,000. That's more people dying in the last 4 wars we had in this country. So we want to know this is a very serious problem. And the main thing you need to know is that you're a human being. I don't care how bad your drug problem is. You can come back. You're a human being. You nurture yourself over time. That's how you're going to get this. Step by step. 6 months, a year, 2 years. And once that recovery is stabilized, it's going to be very hard for you to go back because you're going to like what you see in your life. You'll like what you're doing. You'll like how you see yourself. If you prepare yourself properly by identifying every craving as an enemy, deadly, dangerous thought, and you behave in that way like it is, more than likely you're going to have a good life in sobriety for a long time. We don't want to think about, oh man, I got to worry about my addiction attacking me. I don't know if I'm going to make it. No, you're in control. That's part of recovery, is to regain control. The only way a person ever goes back to using drugs again is if they make a decision in their mind. Drugs don't have a brain. Heroin doesn't have a brain. Alcohol doesn't have a brain. Cigarettes doesn't have a brain. We have the brain. So the only way I will ever go back to drugs is if I make a decision. I've been sober for 46 years. So the only way that we will go back is we allow our addiction to manipulate our mind. And I'm going to talk about the recovery thinking and relapse thinking in one of these sessions that we're going to have. I'm going to be talking about that soon, so we can get a very clear picture. In the book, I go much more in depth on all of the things that you guys have heard me talk about on YouTube. In the book, I go much more in depth. In the drug addiction, the most powerful enemy against a recovering sober mind, chapter 1, chapter 2, 3, all the way up, I talk about so many beneficial things that can help you learn how to stay sober. And in that first chapter, I talk about the first high all the way to full-blown addiction, which is to help prevent people from getting involved with drugs and thinking that it's okay because they don't get hurt immediately. I talk about how it leads into controlling the mind and influencing the mind and conditioning your mind, and eventually you become full-blown, living in bumhood. Instead of manhood or womanhood, you're living in bum. It's a horrible way to live. I can't think of anything worse that a person can do than to give themselves over to drugs. And remember, the addicted person did not plan on becoming addicted. So you're living a mistake. Nobody planned on it. So what are you going to do? Now that you know that you're living this horrible, torturous mistake, what are you going to do? That's the question. It's your life. It's up to you. Like I promised, over the years, I've been writing notes. Every time I give a lecture, run a group, or have a good thought about how to beat drug addiction, I would write a note. So this is one of my notes from July 2007. Drug addiction has created a culture of poverty, pattern of thinking among poor, middle class, and rich Americans, resulting in this group of people functioning intellectually on an animalistic level where reasoning and logic is non-existent. The drug brain that is found in the addicted in the addict functions on feelings and instinct. The drug brain that is found in the addict functions on feeling and instinct. There is no vision past the craving, no planning for the better, only what I want right now. And I will get it, even if I am harmed, imprisoned, or killed. People who hate Americans like Al Qaeda love to see our people in this mental state of disgrace, barbarism, and shame because it is easier to outthink us, and it is a form of self-destruction. So when we're on drugs, we're not even functioning on a human level, man. We function on feelings and instinct. We could say to ourselves in a situation where we're trying to get some money, man, I know I shouldn't do this. And then 2 seconds later, turn around and do it because you're not in control of yourself. You're functioning on feeling and instinct. I feel like I want it and I'm going to get it. So we want to remember that. Also, keep in mind, this is your opportunity to go into detox. They have detox all over the country. And if you don't know where they are, go to a hospital. And they will tell you, if there's not one in that hospital, they will tell you where to go. I hope that this discussion will enlighten the people that I'm talking to. And I wish you the best. God bless.